Hi, and welcome to another installment of Fun with Flags. No, that's another show. Um, Hi, and welcome to another installment of Q&A with me, Eric Bodelson. Today we are going to talk about digital transformation. This video was uh, talked about, Q&A from the logistics perspective, which I have a lot of experience with. I'm going to delve into my process and methodology, sharing my philosophies and experiences around digital transformation. So you should be able to get some of my experience in doing digital transformation while gleaming from the fact that I'm going to give you practical knowledge from what I've learned in logistics. I'm going to draw from my own experiences and outline the history of digital transformation, its evolution, um, why companies choose to go through a digital transformation, and a high level overview of some of the steps involved in the whole process. Um, this will be kind of a 10,000-foot view of what the project looks like and how many steps, of which I'm going to just highlight about eight, um, are involved in a digital transformation. Um, I believe my insight's going to offer a universally acceptable perspective on digital transformation and its successes. And I'm hoping you'll listen and hear some of my concerns when you do these, um, in terms of how a corporation stops being so corporate when they've decided to go down the path of a digital transformation. So, with all that said, let's get started. Digital transformation is probably my favorite subject matter to discuss with you guys because it is the process of corporations experiencing humility. Um, and sometimes that humility has never been felt by many of their employees. So I love digital transformation because the outcome is supposed to be a dare I say, a utopia where everybody feels like they have succeeded and they're proud of working with each other. Um, it's the opportunity for a corporation and the corporate head office to to rebirth itself in the eyes of not only its employees but its customers, and its perspective and its prospects. Those would include employees as well as new customers that they might want to attract. It's an opportunity to adopt newer technology, but it needs to go um, hand in hand with a process of humility and listening to staff and open mindedness. You're asking employees that might have been doing the same job for X amount of years, feeling very comfortable doing it, to move onto a new platform. This is going to come with some resistance. Um, you're asking employees to maybe do more work or capture more information about what employees are doing, um, and they might feel very threatened. The way to overcome this as a corporation is humility. You be upfront with them. You say, "This is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it." And I'll go into the whys you might be doing it in a little bit. But um, if you do this and you do it the right way, it's just amazing what happens to a company and its employees and its persona within the world. It's like bang. And I've seen it. I've seen it. That's why I get so excited about it. The process uplifts everyone, whether it be the employee's skill set. Now we've got software that's maybe modern, and they could, if they're unhappy with you as a company, maybe they can go out and work at another company. Well, this is a wonderful thing. If they're unhappy working for you, do you really want them working for you? Do you really want to fire them? No, I don't think you probably do. But you also don't want a bunch of unhappy employees. If they get their job done, why would you fire them? But if they're unhappy and miserable and, hey, this is Bill, when he answers the phone and he says, as opposed to, hi, this is Bill. What can I help you with today, customer? I'd much rather have the second Bill. And if we uplift our employees and they decide, hey, I don't like working for you, it doesn't usually happen in a good digital transformation, but it does sometimes. They now have that ability, if you're adopting software that is widely used in the workforce, to go work at another company without having to feel retrained, especially if they've spent a little while learning the software that we're deploying. The kicker for transformation to really stick, corporations must drop their ego. You need to be open to everyone's input. It's a really big deal that you are open to everyone. While you're going to have your goals that you've chosen this software because of this factor and it can do this and you want to measure this and dive into the analytics around this, you really also have to take into account what it is the employees feel uh, when choosing, let's say, to implement workflow. They might say, I saw a corporation try and in a small segment or in a smaller segment of the logistics industry. I'm not going to go into what segment, but I saw them try to put workflow on very skilled employees, and I saw them try to put like 30 or 40 workflow items on that. Well, if you're a skilled employee, or I mean, let's be specific. If you're in customs, do you think you need 30 or 40 workflow items to remind you to fill out specific fields? Probably not. You're gonna feel like you're not valued and you're not going to feel intelligent. You're a customs broker. You have passed one of the hardest tests in the American, I don't know, workforce, the customs exam. You should be valued. And I don't know if you need 30 workflow items. For example. So it needs to be open to feedback. So if you create these 30 workflow items, take people through. Put it through the test. Take 25 open-minded champions of this digital transformation and say, what do you think? Do you like this? Is it gonna cause a revolt? And that's always been my biggest fear when it comes to digital transformation. Truthfully, is if a company doesn't adopt this humility that they need to, that they could employees could resent them and they could revolt. And I really would hate for that to ever happen. So be open to the feedback. You want to build 30 workflow items? Great. Build it and then take it to the person that's going to do the data entry. Say, how do you feel? And maybe have him spend a week doing fictitious data entry. See how he feels after he's done it 30, 40, 50 times. Correctly or incorrectly, truthfully. Because that's another factor that comes into too much workflow. So, what we end up with at the end is these uplifted company. This company that's going to be a powerhouse. We hope it's going to be ready to grow, but sometimes CEOs, this is a CEO's decision, will restructure because there will be redundancy that will be probably precluded or eliminated by taking on newer software. And sometimes it's just a factor. We have too many, because we've eliminated these processes, we have too many people to do maybe one file a month or something like that. Sometimes that does happen, but I leave that up to the CEO. And trust me, I'll dive into that in a little bit. But the goal of a digital transformation is inclusivity. You want everybody involved, and you want people not to feel like they're a cog in the wheel. We want their feedback. It's very important, and we want to build a trust or rebuild a trust sometimes with the employees, and we want them to feel, I think, long term, that the headquarters office is an approachable place for any people in the company. Doesn't mean that they need to go talk to the CEO, but if they need to call up somebody in headquarters and say, "Hey, I've got a problem," it should be there should be somebody there to listen. Um, what that builds is a new trust and a new working relationship, and that is how I judge my digital transformation. My digital transformations are successful when people feel like they can trust their head office again or can approach their head office again uh, without being hit over the head with a wet noodle, whereas numbers are the most important thing. I think in any company in today's world, in America, the most important thing that you have is your employees. And those employees uh, want a sense of worth and value within any company, and they want a sense of uh, they would love to be proud of the company they work for. At least my generation, and they want a sense of being valued within that company. And a lot of times I find that larger corporations, especially in logistics, get hung up in the numbers of performance as opposed to the performance of an individual's worth from a customer's point of view. Does that make sense? So I guess I want to start by going into the history of digital transformation. Um, Digital transformation was very much a evolution, um, a positive evolution, in my opinion, in more ways than one, because digital evolution is such a positive experience, I think, um, from where we were. So, mid 80s, well, let's go with the 80s. The 80s, we started developing computers, right? Okay. Well, this meant that the worker now has information instead of on a typewriter on a central computer, maybe on a file system, or can be shared via email, or they can run programs and they can get more um, data. But all of this information is leading up to corporations having a lack of oversight from the headquarters office. Um, and that oversight can then be directly tied to what's going on with the economy in terms of recessions or um, the financial success of a company, period. And I'm stating it like that because it's important. So we might have had Coca-Cola, for example, realizing that people not don't always have change on them as it evolved from the 80s. 80s, we always had change on us, but the value of the dollar increased. So maybe during the 90s, we looked at, well, people are not carrying around quarters anymore as much. Well, they have them, they're just not as popular. So maybe we need to figure out a way to accept the dollar bill. Well, uh, Coca Cola might have not understood, because their management was segmented, that Bob over here in the vending machine department was already working on this project. And Steve in headquarters, as an executive, said, "You know, I think I'll start a division that works on putting dollar bill machines in these these vending machines, and maybe Samantha, and she works in at a bottling plant at in another country, said, "Hey, I happen to know somebody else in vending, so let's go talk to them, and maybe we'll start another division, and they might get funded by other people." Well, this is a good example of where management consultants might have come in, because what they did is they took and looked at overall projects that the company was going on, and they would generally be able to figure out and unify because they would go through the books, um, that Coca-Cola might have had 10 or 12 people working on how to adapt vending machines, all spending money, um, allocated through their budgeting programs on how we adapt dollar bills into these vending machines. And we have management consultants come in and they start going through line by line and trying to figure this out, usually with an accounting arm as well. And then we have management consultants who are then brought in because a company is failing or might be upside down or not making as much profit as they are. And their job is to restructure a company. So, in both instances, management consultants were really working for headquarters, and they were working for them to adjust their bottom line. The movie Office Space is an absolute gem, and you should watch it when it comes to explaining what management consultants did. And it was told from the perspective of employees. So employees found management consultants filled with jargon that they didn't understand. They would make a lot of empty promises around job cuts. They would make because they're getting paid by headquarters to make deep cuts sometimes, they would make, not, how do I say, not quick decisions, or they would make quick split second decisions and not understand the cost ramifications of those decisions. And they really frustrated employees because they were leading to layoffs, and they would say things like I said, they were telling half truths and say things will get better. Well, who are they getting better for? Well, they were getting better for the CEO and the board because they were cutting the bottom line and trying to save the company. But ultimately, what that might mean was employees were eliminated, which meant the workload of those eliminated employees was then passed back on to um, the remaining employees. So it was, while necessary in a lot of cases, depending on the state of the economy, it wasn't an approach that employees liked. They felt very much demoralized. They felt like the companies that they worked for treated them like a cog in the wheel, and they felt absolutely frustrated that corporations were not paying attention to them as humans and just seeing them as as numbers or lines on a general ledger costs. This left employees, and that movie as well, left management consultants being seen as like the devil. So if you've reached a place where I don't think generally speaking, as a person who's worked with management consultants before, been on the other end of it, there's about no place lower than what is a management consultant as far as I perceive them. They are really not. They were cutthroat people. It was almost a curse word in the working industry. So there's an old saying: if you've reached that low of a place, there's nowhere to go but up, right? So onward and upward, we took these management consultants, being good at what they do, uh, realized that they had to rebrand, and they did that by taking the concept of a restructure and making it a positive experience for everybody. So now we're going to take a restructure and we're going to add a piece of software to it. And we're going to say, how can we make everybody feel inclusive um, in a transformation or in a corporate reform? And how can we force companies to be receptive to this? And what are the benefits to making those changes? And what are the long-term benefits, to the company's bottom line? And they started proving it. So if we took a software, deployed it, got employees buy-in, got employees feedback, um, eliminated processes, and optimized things, we were lowering overhead eventually overall, and employing increasing employee morale. And customers were happier, and we were getting more business. They proved this over time. And employees continue to remain skeptical if you're dealing with a company that has a history of not hearing them. But I'll tell you, if I can get with you and change that mindset, it will make your company so much more powerful. When I give it a digital transformation can be a David and Goliath story where employees had always felt like they're David and they're trying to take on the giant. And if the giant, if we deflate the giant, make it David, it makes all the difference in the world. So this mindset was developed mostly by um, an involvement of management consulting, seeing problems in a way of not trying to lower the bottom line, but fix the way the company runs. And it's generally received as positive in the in the media, as well as by other companies or employees who've gone through a digital transformation. In a digital transformation, there's a lot less disruption, whereas the old methodology, there was a lot more disruption. And you're doing this more, you're more sensitive. You're as a company are more sensitive in the way that we're approaching and trying to win that buy-in. So now I'd like to talk about a little bit about why companies might want to do a digital transformation. Um, and I've got some key reasons that I think might resonate with many of you, and they might explain why a company might go through this. It's not an easy process. It can be fraught with with feelings getting hurt. We don't want that, but sometimes it does happen. Um, it can be challenging. Um, so why would a company want to go through a digital transformation? Well, sometimes we have um, a CEO or management change at the very top levels, and so they're going to do an assessment when they come on, and they are going to try and come up with a way to set themselves apart, being very honest, from the other people that ran the company before. So a lot of times I've seen this a digital transformation get kicked off because of a strategic alignment with the CEO's direct objectives or somebody in executive on the executive team's uh, direct objectives. Um, Sometimes it's a customer centric approach where a customer is demanding something that we can't provide to them unless we change the way that we do business. And whether sometimes it's just literally we cannot provide this data set without the change of the core of the software, no matter how much we want to. Um, Sometimes it's a data driven decision where we're looking at data and analytics, and we can't do data and analytics against a mainframe because mainframes don't necessarily record how long it took Nancy to create this file. It just says, well, I started creating this file on this time, and it doesn't capture how many keystrokes you made. So I can't do analytics against this. So therefore, we need to look at how we can capture that and be informed of that data set via KPIs, and with that information, help drive business growth and look to see how much time might be wasted creating a file. The other is methodology. So, um, and I say it as methodology, I think that's the right term, but it's sometimes companies decide, let's adopt a methodology of agile, which means we can change. Sometimes that's attached to the strategic alignment that's been set forth by a new member of management. But sometimes you'll see people in the head office say, "Hey, I just read this whole article about this, and it sounds like kind of a good idea to have a company that can adapt versus a company that is forced to adapt." Um, Big difference. So if you're still running a mainframe, you're forced to adapt to whatever the demands are. If you are using modern day software, um, you're already adapted, and as the software or as the industry adapts, most likely your software is going to adapt with the industry. So being agile and flexible as a corporation are good ideas. This way you can move with the economy and move with the times. Sometimes it's a cultural change. We will see um, sometimes companies just don't like the way that they're perceived by their employees, um, and they're looking to foster change. And a good way to foster change is working through a digital transformation, because the agile methodology behind it and the nature of being humble and listening to employees as outlined by the constructs of digital transformation will help foster people's perception of what headquarters is. Sometimes it's a technology adoption. So we have a new piece of hardware coming in, or uh, we, if you're Oracle and you made their original piece of software and it ran on a mainframe, um, and they decided, well, no longer going to make those mainframes anymore. Sometimes you have to go in and say, well, now I don't have any backups unless I go try and find an old mainframe on eBay. So we need to adopt newer technology to move with the technology of the times. Other times, it's security. So maybe I'm once again Oracle and I've decided to stop supporting this software. So therefore, I'm not going to release any updates. Well, if that's the case, you're opening your company up to big risk by running non-supported software. I've also seen large corporations still running the green screen, unable to hire talent because they're running green screen. We have younger generations. Younger generations don't want to work on software that's 40 years old. They expect GUIs and interfaces where they can click around through rather than tab, 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 tab through to get to the next screen, or hitting combinations of buttons. That just doesn't work for the younger generation. They expect to use the mouse and the keyboard and type their way into it. Sometimes it's new capabilities that by a large corporation being an early adopter of really sets them apart. And so while I mentioned technology above, sometimes it's a partnership a partnership that might put them in a position to be eons ahead of other companies. So like if um, SpaceX and Starlink decided to partner with FedEx, and they figured out a way to on the zebra on the labels that they print have some type of GPS tag that Starlink can track, and it's only exclusive to FedEx. I think FedEx might say, "Well, I'd be stupid not to do this." Um, it- and if it's exclusive to them, I think they would probably want to adopt that type of technology because there's no competition right now, and it would set them so far apart in the market. And the final reason is they might want to measure employees' success, and that's a big difference than just measuring employees' performance. So sometimes you're looking at measuring how well employees are doing, and you don't want to pin them against each other, but you want to say, how much data are they doing? You want to run analytics against this. Um, so a lot of times we don't have that ability with the old mainframes and the old technology. So that's a good range of why companies want to go through a digital transformation. It's a good thing, in my opinion, as long as they remain open to the change. Now I want to go over the steps involved in a digital transformation. Um, Digital transformation starts, in my opinion, after they've come to a conclusion that they need software to change it. It starts with an investigation as to what software they're either going to develop or use off the shelf within the industry um, to try and set themselves apart or bring themselves in alignment to current industry standards. Um, that investigation could involve some outside consultants that specifically target and work with companies that have a hard time making decisions, doing some um, industry analysis on what software that a company uh, might choose. It's research. Um, or it could happen at the headquarters or IT department. They'll go out and do the research and present their findings. But ultimately, it's headquarters' decision as to which software that they choose or have developed, as they do in some large corporations. But next, after a determination has been made by headquarters as to what software, you want to hire a seasoned, um, you you can call him a project manager, but I don't think that's the right term. I would honestly say managed transformation management director who is going to help you roll out this software. Now he's probably going to build himself initially a team of people if you're a larger corporation, um, and that team should include outside consultants that are experienced with digital transformation. In my case, I've worked with CargoWise, and I've done some WMS stuff and other projects where it's imperative that we have people with knowledge that aren't just that one person um, in charge. It's because I sometimes want to bounce ideas off people that have um, experience or might have seen something on the other side of a deployment that they feel that we shouldn't do. It's also potentially an oversight. So if the CEO wants to really check on me or whoever the person is in charge of the deployment, um, they should be able to get some independent feedback. But that's questionable because I will discuss a lot more about consultants and um, managed service providers in another video series. But in theory, you should be able to get an honest review. And in theory, the person that hired you should be safe unless unless you're not doing something right. Um, but in the corporate world, I always have to say, people look out for number one, and that's themselves. And I don't think that's always the right attitude to have. So, what you're going to see is this managing director um, work with or start building himself a team, and hopefully that includes a project manager, an experienced project manager with different ideology, and they set forth the overall um, ideology that they want in terms of agile versus waterfall versus whatever whatever they feel is the right project management methodology for that type of deployment, depending on what it is. And that project manager works with that managing director, or if it's the project manager himself is PMing it, he then needs to decide one of the most important things in the world, which is what project management software is going to be used. Now, I personally like the most visible stuff we can possibly um, have, so something like Monday.com, which is easy to use and is easily adoptable for our stakeholders, which we'll go into in a minute. But we want something that if the CEO wants to log in and see where we're at with the project, he should be able to log in and see where we're at with the project. We want that visibility. We want that feedback. Even if anybody in the company wants to see where we're at with the project, we want them to be able to see what we're doing. We are not trying to be behind the curtains. We're trying to be forward, front facing, and here to help a company grow. So, the next thing that needs to happen is we have some staff in place. We need to work with headquarters to help us identify stakeholders and champions. Now, these are going to be managers, these are going to be regular employees that have had a history with the company that can help us understand what it is your current software does. And what we want is a lot of times we're going to take those people that can explain what their software does and their current processes, which may or may not be documented. In most cases, they're not, or they're documented in such a format that the formatting was actually obsolete. Seen that. Uh, that we can actually make those people champions of the change, because you're telling me that these people are able to tell me the history and they're able to teach me how to do the exact job that they do in whatever function, whether it be ocean imports, ocean exports, air exports, how they do those jobs in the current software set. And we're also going to need to identify um, stakeholders and process people that can teach us specifics, whether it be a specific to a customer. So these are key stakeholders. These are the ones that are going to help us, or we need to work with throughout the change. We need to find people that we're going to put in a managerial role to oversee. Like if we're going to do a country deployment and it's a smaller country, maybe we have somebody that already is a manager help oversee that portion of it, or help us gather information because they're already boots on the ground, as opposed to us flying over there. Or maybe because they speak the language. That can be a reason. So these key stakeholders need to come from you, and they need to be. It's not always okay. So if I'm trying to do AP, the process of accounts payable, it's not. You might say to me in headquarters, just thinking, well, you should work with your CFO. Well, the CFO might not understand the process because they have only been with the company a few years. They don't know where that process came from, or how that process developed. So sometimes it's a group of people that I need to be with, but I need your help getting in touch with these people and helping me identify who are knowledgeable people within your company. And it has to start at headquarters because usually they're the ones who are giving us the introduction. So we will, once those are identified, we're going to start doing process documentation. So at that point in time, you've got a whole video series on documenting business processes. But in logistics, it's very simple. I sit down with somebody in a room. We write it down, 1, 2, 3. They tell me auditorially, verbally, what is it that they do, and then uh, we go back to their station and we um, go through that process. And I've taken note of any differences, or I've gone back through and listened to both the video recording of them doing the process and the auditory recording, and I'm taking note of keywords that they're using, terminology, and anything that they might not be sure of why they do it this way. So once documented, and that's per transport mode if I'm working in logistics, or per pick process, or if I'm working in warehousing, all of that information is critical. Then there's going to be we've when the PM was hired, he probably hired some developers. So now we're going to look at this from a existing software standpoint of what it is each one of those processes does, and does it make any things like to fire off EDI to the customer, or what customers are involved with EDI. And sometimes I'm going to need a developer, if you don't have one on staff, to help us understand exactly what's going on in the background. Once all of this is documented, and the background process documentation is almost separate, because we need that first round of what is the end user doing, we will then start the development process and start outlining one by one what is the process and what is the process in the new system. What are the gaps? We're going to run gap analysis. We're going to look at exceptions, and how are we handling exceptions? Are we involving workflow? And once that's defined, and also we want to ultimately understand what headquarters is trying to capture as the KPIs for employees, and how they're performing. Is it EDI triggers for specific customers? All of that has to start. It has to be developed into the project plan. So now we're building the project plan. We're going to go through and start developing around the project. Now, those might be subjective to change, or iterations, or as we get employee feedback and customer feedback, but we're going to start developing. As we're developing, we want to also work with, I suggest wholeheartedly, getting people's attention is so important in this process. I would hire out of work comics, and out of work actors, anybody who's going to be a dynamic speaker, or anybody who's going to engage people, uh, to help run and build a training program, and or create training videos. So we're going to start developing a training program. That training program, I think, needs to be interactive on top of having recordings. And I love doing training sessions with employees, and working out an entire program. And we're going to incorporate the terminology we've learned from your existing software into the training, even if we put it in brackets. But I like the concept of having screenshots, and within those screenshots, we can actually go in and create tests. Like, let's say we're filling out a BL. What are the required fields of a BL? Well, I have software that can go in, and we can take an overlay of that screenshot and see if people are paying attention to what we're teaching. It is so important that they're taught the correct way the first time. And the reason being is it's 3 times harder to unlearn something that they might have learned improperly than it is to teach them something new. This was, I think, a Harvard study that actually did this. And muscle memory is a key factor, and that biggest muscle that you have is the brain. So you want to make sure that people are understanding, and we are overseeing how they are inputting data, uh, unless we're working with testers who are going to be, of course, in flux and use, or hopefully be adaptive people in their mindset, that they can understand that we're going to be in flux, and as we're working through workflow and working through exceptions. So the goal is a dynamic person to catch their attention, and interactive training in the sense that we want to make sure that we are looking at the way that they're doing it, not just from a data standpoint, but I've used this program called WalkMe, and it walks you through the process. Okay, so we've got maybe a guy talking in the background, and maybe a chat bubble pops up and it says, "This is this, and this is why we're doing it." And while he might be saying it uh, vocally, the chat bubble is going to pop up and talk about why he's saying it. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking interactive training. It's got to be interactive. It's the way to go, and it will sustain a company long term. So as begun, we've gotten the development started, we will start testing as well. So as each thing happens, we're going to start doing testing, and this is going to shake out things like how many files we can open in a day potentially, or it's going to validate some of the functionality that we're going to set up. But uh, before we do testing, we have to talk about master data, because we've got to set up the system. So um, while we were in development mode in the software that I've worked with, we were able to still develop, regardless of all of the settings that we need to go into the default system. So development can start, but we've got to start building out the settings in the default system in terms of security rights, and registry settings, and all of those different things on a per country basis. And we also need to work with master data on taking data out of your existing system and putting it into the new system. Now that can be it is an entire video on itself, but it is, in my opinion, getting it right is great, but getting it right and keeping it right long term is the goal, and that is a bigger goal than getting it partially right the first time, because we can work with partially right, but we don't want to make sure that we don't define insanity and keep doing the wrong thing. As part of the training process is also uh, the documentation process, and that documentation process should include um, SOPs for customers, uh, if there's a different procedure per customer, and then your overall operating SOPs, which are or can be different than your training material. So SOPs can be more of I worked with a company, and they had a standard set of operating principles that were bulleted items that they'd come up with as part of their operating system in the forwarding and 3PL world. And this core value was something that they adopted 30 years ago. And we had to build workflow and the digital transportation around whatever these principles were, whether it be, might have been a process called capture the BL, or input the BL. And some things were vague and some things were very specific. So we had to build a mindset of these stopgaps to fill out this original system that they had from 30 years ago. And the stopgaps were in fact workflow. Um, so where these requirements came into is they had sold customers throughout the years on these operating principles, and they felt so strongly about continuing these principles. They felt like uh, they were good principles, and they wanted to continue offering that principle core mindset to their customers. So we had to build the system around this core, and it worked. And ultimately, the headquarters was happy. Me being a digital transformation aficionado, yeah, I didn't want to deal with the old way and the old mentality I felt like here's your opportunity to retire this old way and sell the new way, which I think eventually they were going to do. Um, but this CEO was saying, let's do a one for one as much as possible so that we can get this rollout done. Yes, some of our key customers know that we're moving on to newer software, but even they agreed that for some of their shipments, it was going to be a one for one, allowing us to build and deploy the process and then come back and work with them individually on what their requirement, what they will want and what customization they were like wanting to see. Um, big customer, 60,000 products. It was nice that we were able to sell them on that attitude. Um, so after we feel like we've sussed out um, a core process, we want to then go back and gather. We want to open testing up to people that can give us good critical feedback to what we've come up with a core process. Um, we want to find out if there are too many workflow items, if they feel like they're being, if I've got a customs broker and customs broker says, am I having to be reminded to put in data in a field that I've been filling out essentially for the last 30 years? Why am I feeling, I don't want to feel like a child after I've ran through this process 30 times. I still feel like I'm a child and I'm not being appreciated for my own intelligence and the fact that I'm a licensed customs broker. So these are feedbacks that you're going to gather. You're also going to gather feedback potentially from customers. You want to see if you're meeting those data requirement sets. You're also going to look at before you engage your customers. I would look at um, matching the data quality that you have in your existing system. Because a lot of times you'll engage your customers, unless you do this at the very beginning of the project, you'll engage your customers and they're like, well, if you're going to move software, maybe I want this, this, and this, and this, and this. And they become very demanding. So sometimes up to the CEO again. Sometimes the CEO is going to say, I just want to get this done, and then we can talk to customers. And so we're just going to do a match one for one, with the exception of maybe if it's being driven by a customer specifically. In order to retain the customer, we have to finish this project. Um, those are the things that are a discussion. Those need to be once you've got these results, these feedback. You go through your boardroom, and you go back and you say, what do we find? And then if all of it's met and you feel like it's good, then do a small rollout. I like a small rollout. I don't like Big Bang. I hate Big Bang, as a matter of fact, because people have a tendency, without oversight, to um, get things wrong. And if we're not observing, they're learning bad behaviors and they continue those bad behaviors. And unteaching them bad behaviors is, like I said, 3 times harder than teaching them something new. So I believe in floor walkers. I believe in you know uh, anything to provide oversight and help and make them feel like the digital transformation matters. That we value their work and we value their feedback, and you know we want to look at data as they're creating. We want to look over their shoulder, and it's not to be mean. It's so that we can prevent them from doing the wrong thing and doing that wrong thing long term. So small rollout now, get results from that, um, and then we're going to scale that implementation. So now we're going to go from one small rollout of a small branch in wherever to maybe the whole country. Uh, then from there, we'll go country by country or branch by branch or division by division, depending on how both the project manager and headquarters feel it should be rolled out. And again, I always believe it's collaboration. So, um, that should give you a pretty good overview of the steps. Now, I can tell you on my last one, I think there was 5 or 6,000 steps because when you're building your project, you're going to have to build it on a per customer, per country basis. So you have to look at all of those factors and test around each one of those as you're rolling out your scaled implementation. So a lot of times you're going to find there's multiple months in between each rollout until you can uh, mitigate and perform rollouts with 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 such confidence that you can literally turn it on and feel like uh, the employees are ready and they can go. So it will move faster as you have found your bugs. So I hope that provides you some really good understanding of how we do a digital transformation and why we do it and how successful they can be and how and just how wonderful they can make employees feel who might have felt undervalued in the past. Just to reiterate the key points, so I kind of took you through uh, the history of digital transformation, how it evolved out of management consulting, because it, we needed management consultants needed a softer approach and a more winnable approach because they had to got themselves a really bad rap after the movie. Uh, they really did. They had a terrible reputation. Um, and then I took you through why companies choose a digital transformation. And then I kind of gave you a project overview, highlighting key uh, key some key success or some key elements that I have found get more results and more success uh, when we're looking at that rollout at a higher level. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and have learned something from it and understand why I like digital transformation. I really do like the win and the mentality of making a company, of bringing a company into the future. And I like the approachability aspect that corporations or headquarters then gains from a transformation by listening to their employees, which they might not have been doing in the past. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening. Appreciate you.